He called her nothing in a room full of armed men, but he did not know she was carrying the one secret that could bring him to his knees. Mara Ellis walked out of Caleb Rourke's Charleston mansion with blood on her sleeves, rain in her hair, and an ultrasound photo hidden in a drawer he had not opened yet. Behind her, the most feared Mafia boss on the Carolina coast believed he had only wounded a woman's pride. He was wrong. This is not just a story about a dangerous man and the woman who left him. It is about dignity, motherhood, betrayal, and the painful difference between protecting someone and owning them. Stay until the end, because when Caleb finally opens that drawer, the truth will destroy the man he used to be. Like this video and comment where you are watching from. The drawer stayed closed, holding the kind of truth no mansion, no money, and no armed man could keep buried forever. Before Mara Ellis ever walked out of Caleb Rourke's house with rain in her hair and a child beneath her heart, she belonged to the other side of Charleston. Not the side printed on postcards where pastel houses glowed in the sun and tourists walked slowly beneath iron balconies. Mara belonged to the waterfront after midnight, where the air smelled of diesel salt sweat and old blood. She belonged to the cracked vinyl chairs of St. Jude's Community Clinic, to the flicker of tired fluorescent lights, to the people who came through the side door because hospitals asked too many questions and police reports could ruin what little life they had left. She was 32, though some nights she felt twice that. Her face still had softness when she slept, but awake there was a steadiness in her eyes that made people lower their voices without knowing why. Mara had been an Army trauma medic before she became a clinic nurse. She had learned to find a pulse with gunfire in the distance. She had learned to tie off bleeding while helicopters screamed overhead. She had learned that panic wasted time, and time was the first thing dying people ran out of. At St. Jude's, nobody cared about her medals or old deployment photos packed in a box under her bed. They cared that she could stitch a split hand without making a man feel stupid for being scared. They cared that she remembered which mother needed antibiotics set aside until payday. They cared that when someone came in shaking ashamed or bleeding through a shirt, Mara looked at the wound first and the story second. That Friday night Charleston was drowning in rain. Water ran down the clinic windows in silver ropes. Thunder rolled over the harbor deep and slow like something heavy being dragged across the sky. The waiting room smelled of wet clothes, burnt coffee, and antiseptic. A television in the corner played a late news broadcast with the sound turned low, but nobody watched it. A dock worker named Raymond sat near the front desk with his left hand wrapped in a towel gone red at the edges. "You should have come in an hour ago," Mara said, guiding him into the treatment room. Raymond gave her a tired grin. "Was hoping it would quit bleeding on its own. Bleeding rarely gets bored and leaves." He laughed, then winced when she peeled back the towel. The cut ran across his palm deep enough to need stitches, but clean enough to be simple if he stopped pretending he was made of iron. "You men and your pride," she said, snapping on gloves. "My wife says the same thing. Your wife sounds smart." "She is. That is why I do not tell her everything." Mara looked up at him. Raymond sighed. "Yes, ma'am. I will tell her about the stitches. I hate being called ma'am, but I like honesty." She worked quickly, needle flashing under the light thread sliding through skin with neat precision. Raymond watched her hands. "You always this calm?" Mara tied the last knot. "No." He waited. She taped gauze over the wound. "I just know falling apart usually has to wait its turn." Raymond stared at her for a moment like he understood more than she meant to give him. Then he looked away. After he left the clinic, settled into the strange quiet that came after midnight. The front desk clerk had gone home early because her daughter had a fever. Dr. Hanley had fallen asleep in his office with his glasses on his chest and medical charts open across his lap. Mara cleaned the treatment room by herself. She wiped the table, counted the remaining suture packs, restocked gauze, and made a note to order more gloves, even though she knew the clinic would tell her the budget was already bleeding harder than the patients. Her medical bag sat on a chair near the door. It was old canvas army green, faded into gray with one strap sewn back on in black thread. Inside were the tools she trusted most: gauze tape gloves, scissors, saline, a penlight, a stethoscope with her name written on the tubing in permanent marker. She checked it every night. Not because she expected disaster, because disaster had a way of entering through unlocked doors. At 12:43, someone knocked on the back entrance. 3 hard hits. A pause. One more. Mara stopped with a roll of bandage in her hand. The back door was not for ordinary patients. People used the front when they wanted help. They used the back when they wanted help without witnesses. She turned off the treatment room light and moved quietly down the narrow hall. Rain hammered the roof. The clinic seemed to hold its breath around her. Through the small side window, she saw a man standing in the alley. His shoulders were soaked dark, one hand pressed against his ribs. His head was bowed, but the security light caught the line of his jaw and the blood running between his fingers. No car waited beside him. No friend held him up. No weapon showed in his hands. Mara opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. "We're closed." The man lifted his head. For 1 second, the storm outside seemed to fall silent. His eyes were nearly black sharp with pain and control. He looked like a man who had spent his entire life refusing to ask for anything and hated his body for forcing the issue. "I need a nurse," he said. "You need an emergency room. No hospitals. That is what people say right before they die somewhere inconvenient." His mouth moved like he almost smiled, but pain cut through it. "I can pay." I did not ask. Something flickered in his face. Surprise, maybe. Men like him were not used to mercy arriving before money. Mara studied him through the gap. Expensive coat. Too expensive for the neighborhood. Good leather shoes ruined by rain. Blood loss making his posture less steady than he wanted it to be. Dangerous, probably. Dying, maybe not yet. She slid the chain free. Inside. He stepped past her and left red drops across the tile. "Name?" Mara asked. He hesitated. "Cole." She gave him a look. "Try again." "Cole is fine. Nobody bleeding through a $3,000 coat gets to be mysterious in my clinic. Sit down, Cole." He obeyed, which told her the wound was worse than his pride. Mara locked the back door and guided him into the treatment room. He lowered himself onto the table with controlled stiffness. She cut open his shirt without asking permission. Under the torn fabric, the blade wound ran low along his ribs. Deep enough to need work. Not deep enough to kill him if he stopped losing blood and let her do her job. The edges were jagged. Not a kitchen accident. Not a robbery gone wrong. A message written in steel. "You always meet knives socially?" she asked. His breath caught when she pressed gauze to the wound. "Only when dinner gets dull. Then eat with better people." This time he did smile. Barely. Mara cleaned the wound. He did not curse. Did not plead. Did not try to charm her. He only watched her with a stillness that made the room feel smaller. "Your hands are steady," he said. "My hands are busy. You military used to be. Medic, among other things. That explains it." Mara threaded the needle. "My hands are not accepting compliments from a man who gave me a fake name. Maybe Cole is my name. Maybe I am the governor of South Carolina." He breathed out a laugh, then went pale. "Careful," Mara said. "Humor uses oxygen." The rain hit harder. Thunder shook the windows. The clinic lights flickered once, then steadied. Mara leaned close, focused on the wound. Blood darkened her gloves. His skin was hot beneath her fingers. He smelled of rain-expensive soap and the metallic edge of violence. She worked with calm precision, placing each stitch tight enough to hold, but not so tight the skin would tear. The man watched her as if trying to decide what kind of person saved strangers without asking who they belonged to. "You should be scared," he said quietly. Mara did not look up. Of the wound. Of me? She pulled the thread through. People who say that usually want me to be. I am serious. So am I. Hold still. His eyes stayed on her face. You do not know who I am. I know enough. What do you know that you are hurt? That is enough. Mara tied another stitch. It has to be. The answer seemed to land somewhere behind his ribs, somewhere deeper than the knife had reached. His expression shifted, almost softened, then closed again. Outside, lightning flashed white across the alley. For a heartbeat, it filled the clinic with hard light. Mara saw the tiredness under his control, the faint scar near his temple, the way his jaw tightened not from pain, but from the insult of needing help. She had seen that look before. Soldiers wore it when their bodies failed before their pride did. By the time she finished stitching him, the storm had taken the power. The room went black. Mara heard his breathing change. Easy, she said. A few seconds later, the backup generator coughed to life, but only the rear half of the clinic lit up. Weak yellow light hummed from the hallway. The treatment room stayed mostly dark. Mara opened the emergency drawer and found 2 candles. She lit them with a cheap plastic lighter and set them near the counter. The flame softened the cracked walls. The rain blurred the windows until the outside world looked far away. The man called Cole sat on the table with one hand braced beside him, shirt cut open, fresh bandage taped over his ribs. In candlelight, he looked less like a threat and more like something the night had dragged in before it drowned. You need antibiotics, Mara said, reaching into the cabinet. And rest. I know how medicine works. You came to a free clinic with a knife wound during a storm and lied about your name. I am not making assumptions about your judgment. He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a quiet laugh. It was not a charming sound. It was too tired for that. But it was real. Mara handed him pills in a paper envelope and a bottle of water from the small refrigerator. Take these with food. He looked at the envelope. You do this for everyone. Patch them up and lecture them. Yes. No. Help them without asking what it cost you. Mara leaned against the counter and folded her arms. She should have sent him away the moment the bleeding stopped. She should have called someone. Police, ambulance, anyone who could take danger out of her clinic before it learned her name. But the storm had trapped them, and there was something about the quiet after saving a life that made people careless with truth. What would asking change, she said. It would tell you whether I deserve it. She looked at him then. Nobody bleeding on a table gets to audition for compassion. His gaze sharpened, but not with anger. You believe that I have to. Why? Mara glanced toward the dark hallway where the generator hummed like an old man trying to stay awake. Because I have seen what happens when people start deciding who is worth saving. The room settled around that. He lowered his eyes first. For a while, neither of them spoke. Rain filled the silence. Mara cleaned up the bloody gauze, dropped instruments into a metal tray, and washed her hands at the sink until the water ran clear. When she turned back, he was still watching her. What she asked. You have been through war. It was not a question. Mara dried her hands slowly. So have a lot of people. Not like you. You do not know me. No, he said. But I know that look. Something in his voice changed. The arrogance thinned. Beneath it lived recognition. Mara should not have sat down. She did anyway on the stool across from the table because her feet hurt and the storm was not letting up. He told her he had grown up in Charleston, though not the Charleston with garden tours and painted shutters. He spoke of old houses with locked rooms, fathers who taught sons that tenderness was a liability, mothers who survived by becoming quiet, and boys who learned to make fear useful before fear swallowed them whole. He did not give details. Men like him did not confess. They let a few drops fall and called it a flood. Mara gave him less but more than she usually gave anyone. A field hospital in Afghanistan. The smell of dust and iodine. A friend named Lila who sang Patsy Cline when the generators failed. A day when too many wounded arrived at once and Mara had to choose who got the last breathing tube. Cole listened without interruption, not with pity, not with hunger, not with the lazy interest of a man waiting for his turn to speak. He listened like he understood that some memories needed a witness, not a solution. At some point, Dr. Hanley opened his office door, blinked into the hallway, saw Mara sitting in candlelight with a bandaged stranger, and wisely decided he was too old to ask unnecessary questions. He mumbled something about checking the front and disappeared again. Cole watched him go. "Your doctor always that trusting. Our doctor is 71 and tired of being surprised." The corner of Cole's mouth lifted. Smart man, sometimes. Near 3 a.m, the storm softened. Mara checked the bandage and found no fresh bleeding. His color had improved, though he still carried pain in the corners of his mouth. "You can leave once the rain breaks," she said. "You want me gone? I want you not dead. After that, I do not make emotional investments in strangers." "Is that a rule?" "It is a survival habit." He looked at her in the candlelight. "I have a few of those." I noticed. His eyes held hers too long. The air changed. Not romance, not yet. Something more dangerous because it came before choice. Recognition. 2 wounded people in a poor clinic while the city drowned outside seeing the shape of each other's scars without touching them. Mara looked away first. At dawn, the rain thinned into mist. Cole stood slowly, one hand near his ribs. Mara handed him extra gauze antibiotics and instructions written on clinic stationery. No lifting, no alcohol, no fighting, no whatever got you stabbed. That last one may be difficult. I did not ask if it was convenient. He looked down at the paper, then at her badge. "Mara Ellis," he read. She pulled the badge off and tucked it into her pocket. "And you are still Cole." His eyes met hers. "Thank you, Mara." It was the first time he said her name. For reasons she did not want to examine, she remembered the sound of it. He left through the back door. Mara followed only as far as the threshold. At the end of the alley, a black car waited where there had been no car before. A driver stepped out fast. Too fast. Respectful in a way that looked like fear. Cole slid into the back seat without turning around. The car rolled away toward the harbor. Mara stood in the doorway as morning light leaked over wet brick and old pavement. Something cold moved through her chest. Not regret. Warning. 2 days later, she saw his face on the news. She was in the hospital break room at St. Catherine's, working a rare daytime shift because someone had called in sick. The television mounted in the corner showed footage of Rourke Shipping Headquarters, a federal courthouse, and a photograph of the man from the clinic in a black suit. The headline read, "Caleb Rourke questioned in federal organized crime investigation." Mara stopped with a paper cup of coffee halfway to her mouth. The reporter's voice floated over the room. "Caleb Rourke, Charleston shipping magnate and alleged leader of one of the most powerful crime networks on the Atlantic coast, declined to comment this morning after new questions surfaced regarding racketeering, illegal transport, and suspected ties to several unsolved acts of violence." A nurse beside Mara complained about cafeteria soup. Mara set the coffee down. The man from the clinic was not Cole. He was Caleb Rourke, the most dangerous man on the South Carolina coast. The memory of his blood on her gloves seemed to come alive again. His eyes in candlelight, his voice saying her name. His question, "You do not know who I am." Now she did. Mara walked out before anyone could notice her face. For 6 weeks she told herself the story had ended. She threw herself into work. Night shifts, clinic hours, house calls when someone's grandmother refused to go to the emergency room. She learned to move through exhaustion like it was weather. She stopped looking at black cars. She stopped replaying candlelight conversations. She stopped wondering whether Caleb Rourke remembered the woman who had stitched him back together in a room that smelled of rain and antiseptic. Then her body began telling the truth before her mind was ready. Nausea in the mornings, coffee turning bitter in her mouth, a strange heaviness in her breasts, a missed period she blamed on stress, until stress became a lie too thin to stand on. She bought the pregnancy test at a pharmacy on King Street, choosing the farthest register and paying cash like guilt could be tracked through a receipt. In the bathroom, beneath fluorescent lights that made everything look unforgiving, Mara waited for the result with both hands gripping the sink. 2 pink lines appeared. The world did not explode. That was the cruel part. Somebody flushed in the next stall. A woman laughed outside the door. A hand dryer roared. Life continued with brutal normalcy while Mara stared at a piece of plastic that had split her future in 2. She sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed one hand against her lower stomach. There was nothing to feel. No movement, no curve, no proof anyone else could see. But she knew. Caleb Rourke had left danger inside her life and tenderness inside her body. A child formed in the space between storm and loneliness, between 2 people who had mistaken recognition for safety. "No," she whispered. Then she hated the word the moment it left her mouth. Not because of the baby. Never because of the baby. Because the world attached to that baby had guns, locked rooms, quiet threats, and men who smiled without warmth. Mara paid cash for a private ultrasound at a clinic across town. She wore a baseball cap pulled low and gave no emergency contact. The technician was an older woman with silver hair and gentle hands, who did not ask why Mara's voice shook when she gave her name. The room was dim and cool. Paper crinkled beneath Mara's back. The machine hummed softly. At first the monitor showed only shadows, then the technician tilted the screen. "There," she said. That flicker. Mara stopped breathing. That is the heartbeat. The sound filled the room, small and rapid and impossible. Mara covered her mouth. A laugh broke through her fear and turned into a sob halfway out. She had seen hearts stop. She had fought to bring them back. She had held pressure on wounds and begged men to stay awake. But this heartbeat was different. This one did not ask her to save it. It asked her to stay. The technician printed the ultrasound photo and slipped it into a white envelope. Mara held it with both hands as if paper could bruise. Outside, Charleston looked too bright. Cars passed. Tourists moved along the sidewalk with shopping bags. A man argued into his phone. A carriage horse clopped down the street like the city was still pretending to be gentle. Mara walked until her legs felt weak. She found a bench beneath a live oak and sat with the envelope in her lap. Wind moved through the leaves above her. She touched the place where life had begun hiding beneath her skin. "You are not his violence," she whispered. "You are not my fear. You are mine before you are anything else." For 3 days, Mara tried to decide whether Caleb deserved to know. Deserve was not the right word. She knew that. Children were not rewards for good men or punishments for bad ones. The child had a truth, and truths had a way of rotting when buried too long. She did not want Caleb's money. She did not want his mansion, his name, his protection, or the kind of life that came with men at doors and secrets in every room. She did not know if she wanted his apology. Part of her still remembered the man in candlelight, the one who listened when she spoke of war. Another part remembered the news footage, the federal investigation, the fear, and the driver's posture at the alley. Both men were real. That was the problem. She called Rourke Shipping first. A receptionist with a polished voice transferred her to an assistant who transferred her to silence. She tried a second number listed under a charity connected to his name. A man answered and asked who she was, with the kind of calm that felt like a hand closing over a throat. Mara hung up. On the 3rd day, she wrote a note. "Caleb, We need to speak. It is personal. It concerns something you have a right to know." She stared at the words until they lost meaning. Then she folded the note, unfolded it, and folded it again. That evening, the waterfront clinic called. 2 men had been hurt at a loading dock south of the harbor, one with a crushed hand, one with a head wound. They needed her if she could come. Mara looked at the white envelope on her kitchen table. The ultrasound photo rested inside, quiet as a held breath. She did not know why she slipped it into her medical bag before she left. Maybe instinct, maybe hope. Maybe the city had a cruel sense of timing, and some part of her had learned to listen when the air changed. Outside rain had started again, soft at first, then harder against the windows. Mara zipped the bag closed, placed one hand briefly over her stomach, and stepped into the wet Charleston night toward the waterfront. The rain had started again, soft at first, then harder against the windows, and by the time Mara reached the south end of the harbor, Charleston looked like it had been washed in black glass. The loading docks stretched beneath yellow security lights, all steel water, stacked containers, and long shadows. Cranes stood over the yard like frozen giants. The wind smelled of salt diesel wet rope and river mud. Rain gathered in potholes and trembled every time thunder rolled across the water. Mara pulled her hood tighter and stepped out of the clinic van with her medical bag against her hip. A man in a reflective vest waved her toward a temporary trailer near the cargo gate. "Too hurt," he called over the rain. "One bad hand, one hit his head." "Are they conscious?" Hand guy is cussing. Head guy keeps asking what day it is. Then the hand guy can wait. Inside the trailer, the air was damp and close. A young dock worker sat on a folding chair with blood running down his temple. Another man paced near the wall with his right hand wrapped in a towel, face gray from pain. Mara looked from one to the other and pointed at the man pacing. "Sit before you fall. I am fine. You are leaking through the towel and lying badly. Sit." The man sat. Mara worked quickly. The head wound looked worse than it was, though the confusion worried her. She checked the man's pupils, asked his name, the date where he was. He got 2 answers right and 1 wrong. She cleaned the cut, wrapped it, and told the supervisor he needed monitoring for the next several hours. The crushed hand took longer. 2 fingers were broken. The skin had split across the knuckles. The man kept trying to joke until Mara set the bones enough to splint them. He cursed so loudly the trailer went quiet. Mara did not blink. "Good," she said. "That means you are still with me." The man stared at her through watering eyes. "You always this mean. Only when I am helping." By the time both men were stable, the rain had thickened into sheets. Mara washed her hands in the small sink, dried them on a paper towel that fell apart between her fingers, and packed her bag again. The ultrasound envelope rested inside, tucked between gauze and a roll of tape. She touched it once without meaning to. A tiny life, a secret folded in paper. She had almost convinced herself that coming here meant nothing, that Charleston's harbor was large enough for 2 people to exist beneath the same storm and never cross paths. Then the first gunshot cracked across the yard. Mara froze. A second shot followed, then a third. Men shouted outside. The dock worker with the splinted hand tried to stand. Mara shoved him back into the chair. "Stay down." Another shot slammed into metal somewhere nearby, sharp enough to make the trailer walls tremble. Mara grabbed her medical bag and moved to the door. The supervisor caught her arm. "You cannot go out there." She looked at his hand until he released her. "I can if someone is bleeding." "Mara." She opened the door. Rain struck her face. The yard beyond the trailer had turned chaotic. Men were running between containers. A forklift sat abandoned with its lights still on. Somewhere near the blue cargo stacks an engine roared, then died. Another shot flashed white in the dark. Mara dropped low behind a parked truck, her body remembering before her mind could argue. She scanned the yard through rain and moving shadows. A man fell near the containers. Even from a distance, even through the storm, she knew him. Caleb Rourke. For 1 second, everything inside her went still. Then his men reached him, voices tight with panic. One knelt beside him. Another looked around with a gun raised. A third shouted into a phone, but the words broke apart in the rain. Mara ran. She made it 10 feet before a tall man stepped from behind a container and pointed a gun at her chest. "Stop." Mara lifted one hand, medical bag clenched in the other. "He is bleeding out. Back up. If I back up, he dies." The man's face was hard, handsome in a severe way, his eyes steady and cold. He did not look like a thug. He looked like someone who noticed everything and forgot nothing. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Someone more useful than whoever you are calling." His gun did not lower. Mara's voice snapped through the rain. "I am a trauma nurse and a former Army medic. If that bullet hit what I think it hit, he has minutes, not pride. Move." The man's gaze flicked toward Caleb, then back to her. Behind him, Caleb coughed. Blood darkened his mouth. That sound decided it. The man lowered the gun. "Let her through." Mara dropped to her knees beside Caleb. Blood soaked the front of his shirt high on the left side. Too high for comfort, too fast for delay. His face was pale beneath the rain lashes, dark against his skin. For a terrible heartbeat, he looked nothing like the man on the news, nothing like the man whose name made rooms go quiet. He looked like a body trying to leave the world. Mara tore open his shirt. "Light," she said. No one moved fast enough. She looked up. Now. The tall man grabbed a flashlight from someone and angled it down. Mara pressed gauze hard against the wound. Blood pushed warm between her fingers. Caleb's eyes fluttered open. For one raw second, they focused on her. Mara. Her breath caught. He remembered. The rain beat against her shoulders. Men shouted around them. Somewhere, tires screamed against wet pavement, but the sound of her name in his mouth cut through all of it. She leaned closer. "Stay awake." His mouth curved faintly, as if pain had not yet beaten arrogance out of him. "Still giving orders. Live men can complain later." His breathing hitched. The wound was bad. The bullet had torn through muscle and opened something that wanted him dead quickly. Mara packed the wound, pressed harder, and spoke without looking away from her hands. "You. Hold this here." A man reached in wrong. "Not there. Here. If you cannot follow instructions, find someone who can." He shifted fast. "You," Mara said to another. "Get me more light." The man stared at her. She looked up. "Do I need to say it in blood?" He moved. The tall man crouched across from her. "Ambulance." Caleb's hand closed around Mara's wrist, shocking in its strength. "No hospital," he rasped. Mara did not soften her voice. "You are not in a position to negotiate." His grip tightened. "No hospital." Mara looked at the tall man. "Name." "Gideon." "Gideon. Where can he be moved?" He hesitated. Mara's eyes sharpened. "Somewhere clean, somewhere warm, somewhere with enough light for me to close this properly. Or you can all stand in the rain and watch your king bleed into the concrete." Gideon held her gaze for 1 second, then stood. "Bring the car." The Rourke mansion rose from Charleston's old district like a house built to intimidate memory. White columns climbed into the dark. Iron gates opened without a sound. Live oaks bent over the drive, their moss hanging like torn lace in the rain. The windows glowed gold, but nothing about the place felt warm. Mara entered through the side door with blood on her jeans and Caleb unconscious on a stretcher carried by his men. No one asked her name. They looked at her wet hair, her cheap jacket, her old medical bag, and decided what they saw. a clinic nurse, a woman who did not belong on marble floors, a nobody. Mara had no time to care. "Put him there," she ordered, pointing to a wide table in a downstairs sitting room. A man frowned. "That is antique mahogany. Then it has lived long enough." Gideon gave the order with a glance. The men obeyed. The room transformed under Mara's hands. Lamps were dragged close, towels stacked, hot water brought. A private emergency kit appeared from a locked cabinet stocked with supplies too expensive for any ordinary home and too complete to be innocent. Mara did not ask why Caleb Rourke had a surgical kit in his mansion. She already knew the answer would not make her feel safer. She cut, cleaned, packed, sutured, and monitored while rain tapped against the tall windows. Her world narrowed to pulse breath, bleeding pressure, color, temperature. The body told the truth when men would not. Caleb slipped in and out of consciousness. Once he opened his eyes and stared at her like he was trying to place her in more than one life. "The clinic," he whispered. "Yes. You saved me there. Do not make it a habit." His lips barely moved. Too late. Then he was gone again, pulled under by pain and blood loss. Hours passed. Mara's back ached. Her fingers stiffened. Blood dried at the edge of her wrist where her glove had torn. At some point, someone brought coffee. She ignored it until Gideon set it within reach and said quietly, "You need your hands steady." "They are steady. You still need coffee." She took it without thanking him. Near dawn, Caleb stabilized. His breathing evened. His pulse strengthened beneath Mara's fingers. The bleeding slowed enough to trust the bandages. She sat back for the first time in hours and felt every muscle in her body begin to protest. The room was silent. Men stood along the walls, their earlier arrogance replaced by something more uneasy. They had watched her reach into their world and hold their boss to life by force. That kind of competence made people uncomfortable when it came from someone they wanted to dismiss. Mara stripped off her gloves and dropped them into a metal basin. Gideon stepped closer. "Will he live if he listens?" Gideon looked at Caleb, then back at her. "That may be a problem." Mara almost smiled. Almost. She picked up her medical bag and followed a housekeeper to a marble bathroom. The woman said nothing, but her eyes moved to Mara's blood-stained clothes, then to the bag, then away. Inside, Mara locked the door and braced both hands on the sink. The bathroom smelled of lavender soap and money. Gold fixtures gleamed beneath soft lights. A white towel lay folded beside the basin, too clean for a house that hid this much blood. Mara turned on the water and washed Caleb from her hands. Pink swirled into the drain. She caught sight of herself in the mirror. Pale face. Dark hair pulled loose from its tie. Blood under one fingernail. Rain drying on her cheeks. She looked like a woman who had been foolish enough to return to the edge of danger with hope tucked in her bag. The envelope. Mara went still. She opened the medical bag and found it where she had left it. White paper slightly bent at one corner. Inside, the ultrasound photo waited with its tiny, impossible heartbeat captured in grainy black and white. Her throat tightened. She had planned to tell him. Not like this, not in a mansion full of armed men, not after digging a bullet path out of his chest. But the truth was still true even when the timing was cruel. Maybe he deserved to know. No. Deserve was too simple. The child deserved to begin without lies. Mara returned to the sitting room as the first gray light pressed against the windows. Caleb lay on the table, turned makeshift bed, his face stripped of command by exhaustion. Without the black suit, without the cold stare, without men waiting for orders, he looked almost like the wounded stranger from the clinic. The man who had listened. The man who had said her name as if it mattered. Mara sat beside him with the envelope in her lap. For several minutes she said nothing. The house shifted awake around her. Footsteps passed in the hallway. Voices murmured beyond closed doors. Rain slid down the glass. Caleb stirred just after sunrise. His eyes opened with violent clarity, one moment empty, the next sharp. He looked at the ceiling first, then the room, then Gideon near the door. Finally, he looked at Mara. Recognition passed across his face. Not warmth. Calculation. Mara felt the change before he spoke. The man from the clinic disappeared. The man on the news returned. Caleb Rourke, ruler of rooms, owner of fear, a man who turned pain into armor before anyone could see the wound. One of his men shifted near the wall. "Well, boss," the man said with a smirk. "Looks like your angel came back." Mara stood. The envelope was still in her hand. "Your bleeding is controlled," she said. "You need antibiotics, rest, and someone checking for infection every few hours." Caleb did not thank her. He looked at Gideon. "Pay her." The room went colder. Mara's fingers tightened around the envelope. "I did not ask for money." Wrong words. She saw at the instant his eyes hardened. Gratitude was dangerous to him. Debt was dangerous. Refusing payment made what she had done personal, and personal debt to a woman like Mara in front of men like these was something Caleb Rourke could not tolerate. Another guard laughed under his breath. Maybe she wanted more than money. A second laugh followed, small and ugly. Mara felt every stare land on her skin, her wet clothes, her tired face, her old bag, the faint tremor in the hand holding the envelope. Caleb's jaw tightened. She waited for him to stop it. She waited for the man from the clinic to appear even for 1 second. His eyes moved over her, and something like conflict flickered there. A memory, maybe. Candlelight. Rain. Her hands stitching him shut while he admitted just enough truth to sound human. Then pride rose between them like a locked gate. Caleb said quietly and clearly, "I would never touch a woman like her." The room heard him. The room believed him. Someone laughed. Mara did not move. The words entered her without sound. Not like a slap. A slap had heat. This was colder, cleaner. A blade slipped between ribs by a man who knew exactly where to aim. The envelope bent in her hand. Caleb looked away first. "Get her out!" For a moment, Mara could not hear the rain. She could hear only the tiny heartbeat from the ultrasound room, fast, stubborn, alive. She could tell him. She could lift the photo in front of all of them and make his cruelty choke him. She could say, "You already touched me. You already left something behind. You already have a child." But as she looked at him, pale and proud and surrounded by men who laughed because he had taught them how the answer settled inside her with terrible calm. What kind of father could he be if pride mattered more than mercy? Mara placed the envelope back into her medical bag. She picked it up. Gideon stepped aside as she walked toward the door. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes followed her with something close to shame. No one stopped her in the hallway. The mansion stretched around her in polished silence. Portraits watched from the walls. The chandelier above the entrance hall scattered light across the floor. Rain whispered beyond the front doors. Mara stopped beside a narrow antique table near the stairs. A brass bowl sat on top, filled with keys, cufflinks, and small cards, embossed with names that belonged to people who believed paper could make them important. Beneath the table was a small drawer. Mara opened it. Inside lay a silver lighter, an old receipt, and a fountain pen engraved with Caleb's initials. Her hand trembled only once. She removed the ultrasound photo from the envelope. The tiny shape on the paper looked impossibly fragile beneath the chandelier light. Mara turned it over and uncapped the pen. For a second, she saw the future she had almost allowed herself to imagine. Caleb sitting across from her in some quiet room, his hand on the edge of the ultrasound photo. His face changed by wonder instead of pride. A hard man learning softness not because he deserved it, but because a child required it. The image vanished. Mara wrote slowly, "Even without a father, this baby will know love." She stared at the words until they stopped blurring. Then she placed the photo inside the drawer and closed it softly. No slam, no scene, no plea. Just the quiet burial of a truth Caleb had not been brave enough to receive. Outside, the rain had eased into mist. The city glistened like it had been washed and found guilty. Mara walked through the iron gates before anyone could offer her a ride. Her medical bag hung from one shoulder. Her clothes were stained with Caleb's blood. Her body felt hollow except for the small, fierce presence beneath her heart. At the corner, she stopped and looked back once. The Rourke mansion stood white and silent behind its gates, pretending it had not swallowed something precious. Mara touched her stomach. "I tried," she whispered. Then she turned away. By sunrise, she was at the bus station with cash in her pocket, a change of clothes in her bag, and no plan except distance. The terminal smelled of old coffee, wet coats, and people leaving lives they did not know how to explain. A child slept against his mother's shoulder. An old man read a newspaper with shaking hands. A young woman cried quietly into her phone near the vending machines. Mara bought a ticket south with cash. When the bus doors opened, she climbed aboard and took a seat near the back. The window was fogged at the edges. She wiped a small circle clear with her sleeve. Charleston slid past in pieces as the bus pulled away. Wet streets, closed bars, church steeples. The harbor cranes in the distance, dark against a bruised morning sky. Her phone buzzed once. An unknown number. Mara turned it off. She did not cry when the city disappeared behind her. She did not cry when she found Caleb's dried blood on her cuff. She did not cry when the bus crossed the bridge and the water below opened wide and gray beneath the morning light. She placed both hands over her stomach and breathed until the ache inside her became something she could survive. The road stretched ahead, flat and shining after the storm, carrying her away from Charleston, away from Caleb Rourke, away from the drawer that held the first picture of a child his father did not yet know he had lost. The road carried Mara out of Charleston, but it did not carry Charleston out of her. For 3 hours, she watched rain slide across the bus window and tried not to look back. The city disappeared behind marsh grass gas stations, low bridges, and long stretches of wet highway. Her phone stayed off inside her bag. The ultrasound envelope was gone now, left behind in a drawer beneath Caleb Rourke's chandelier, but Mara could still feel the shape of it in her hand. By late afternoon, the bus rolled into Beaufort, South Carolina. It was not a place that promised rescue. It had no shining skyline, no grand beginning waiting with open arms. It had salt air, quiet streets, fishing boats knocking gently against their slips, and little houses lifted high against floodwater. Spanish moss hung from the trees like gray lace. The sidewalks were damp. The sky was the color of old pewter. Mara stepped off the bus with her medical bag, one change of clothes, and a body that no longer belonged only to her. A woman at the station told her about a room above a closed flower shop near the harbor. The owner was a widow named June Everett, who rented to people who paid cash and did not ask for fresh paint. June opened the door before Mara could knock twice. She was in her 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a cardigan despite the humid air. She looked at Mara's bag, then at Mara's face, then at the hand resting too carefully near her stomach. "You running from a man?" June asked. Mara went still. The older woman shrugged. Women do not come to Beaufort with one bag and no forwarding address because life is treating them kindly. Mara looked down at the key June held between two fingers. "I am running toward quiet." June studied her for a long moment, then handed over the key. "Quiet costs extra when tourists come through." Mara almost smiled. It hurt to almost smile. The room above the flower shop was small, with old wallpaper curling near the ceiling and a window that faced the alley. The bed frame creaked when she sat down. The air conditioner rattled like it resented being alive. But the door locked, the sheets were clean, and nobody in Beaufort said Caleb Rourke's name. That was enough. For a while, Mara built her new life out of small things. A second-hand kettle, a stack of clinic scrubs from a donation box, saltines on the bedside table for the morning sickness, cash folded inside a book no one would want to steal, a blue notebook where she wrote letters to the baby when sleep would not come. Dear little one today, the sea smelled like rain and shrimp boats. I met a woman who pretends not to care about people, which means she probably cares too much. She found work at a community clinic near the harbor, a tired building with mismatched chairs, a front desk held together with tape, and a doctor who looked older than the building itself. Dr. Wade Mercer glanced at her resume, then at the waiting room where a child coughed into his sleeve and an old man rubbed his chest while pretending not to. "You any good?" he asked. "Yes," Mara said. He grunted. "Good. Start now." So she did. Work became the floor beneath her feet. She checked blood pressure, cleaned wounds, gave vaccines to children who screamed before the needle touched them, told fishermen that infection did not respect stubbornness, sat with elderly women who came in for medicine but stayed for conversation. Slowly, people learned her name. At first, she was the new nurse, then Miss Mara. Then just Mara, said with relief when she stepped into a room. Her belly began to show near the 4th month. She hid it under loose sweaters until hiding became foolish. Beaufort noticed because small towns always noticed, but nobody asked too loudly. June made certain of that. One afternoon, Mara heard June speaking from the flower shop steps to 2 women who had paused too long beneath the window. "If you are looking for gossip, church has better lighting," June said. "Move along." After that, people smiled and looked away. The baby moved for the first time during a storm. Mara was sitting by the window with the blue notebook open across her lap. Rain tapped the glass. Downstairs, June was listening to old gospel music while arranging flowers she claimed she no longer sold. Mara had been writing about Dr. Mercer falling asleep in his office with a sandwich in one hand when she felt it, a flutter, soft as a secret. Her hand flew to her stomach, again, small, real. There. "Oh," she whispered. The baby moved once more. Mara bowed her head and pressed both hands over the place where loneliness had become life. "Hi," she said, her voice breaking. "I am here." That night she cried, not loudly, not in the way that empties a person, but quietly with one palm on the window and the other on her belly. For the first time since Charleston, she let herself believe that maybe a life could be small and still be whole. Back in Charleston, Caleb Rourke tried not to think about her. He failed with discipline. He told himself the nurse had been proud. She had refused money. She had walked out because she wanted to wound him back. That was all. A simple explanation for a simple problem. But nothing about Mara Ellis stayed simple. The mansion remembered her. The sitting room where she had saved him. The marble floor where her wet shoes had left faint marks. The hallway where she had walked away without begging. The silence she left behind had weight. One evening, Caleb stood in his study with untouched whiskey in his hand, while rain streaked the windows. Did she take anything, he asked. Gideon Shaw stood near the door. No. Money, no. Files, no. Jewelry. Gideon's voice stayed even. Nothing. Caleb turned the glass between his fingers. What kind of woman does that? Gideon watched him carefully. The kind who was not there for what you thought. Caleb's eyes cut to him. Gideon lowered his gaze, but not fast enough. Weeks passed. Caleb sent no apology. Mara sent no word. Yet he began asking questions he had no right to ask. Quiet questions. Expensive questions. Her old military records. Her clinic work. Past addresses. Any family. Any husband. Any man who might have come looking for her. The answers came back scattered and thin. Mara had moved through war zones, hospitals, clinics, and temporary rooms. Her records had gaps. Her life had been built by a woman who never expected anyone to come searching with mercy. Then Gideon placed a grainy photo on Caleb's desk, a pharmacy security image from outside Mobile. The woman wore a baseball cap. Her face was turned partly away, but Caleb knew the posture. Shoulders held tight, head slightly lowered, a body prepared to be struck but refusing to fall. Mara. In her hand was a bottle of prenatal vitamins. The room went silent. Caleb stared at the photo. Gideon said nothing. Caleb's voice came low. "Find her." In Beaufort, Mara saw the first black SUV on a Wednesday. It moved slowly past the clinic during lunch, too clean for the street windows dark as oil. She was checking a little boy's ear infection when it passed the blinds. Her hand paused only half a second. The boy's mother noticed. "You all right, Miss Mara?" Mara smiled. "Just tired." The SUV came again the next day. Then a man in sunglasses asked questions at the harbor. Then another stood too long in the pharmacy aisle and bought nothing. Mara stopped sleeping well. She packed an emergency bag beneath her bed. Cash, baby clothes, medical papers, prenatal vitamins, the blue notebook. A pocket knife Dr. Mercer had pressed into her hand after a drunk patient kicked over a chair in the waiting room. June found her folding clothes after midnight. The older woman stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "He found you." Mara sat slowly on the edge of the bed. "I think so." "Is he the father?" Mara looked away. June's face softened for 1 second before it hardened again. "Does he hit no? Does he own rooms when he walks into them?" Mara let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "Yes. Worst kind." Mara touched her stomach. "I cannot let him bring my child into that life." June stepped inside and closed the door. "Then do not wait until he knocks." Mara planned to leave before dawn. She did not get the chance. The next afternoon was heavy with heat. Mara had walked to the market because the clinic truck would not start. She bought milk crackers, peaches, and a tiny pair of yellow baby socks she did not need but could not leave behind. She was 7 months pregnant by then, round and tired and slower than fear wanted her to be. When she turned onto the street, Caleb Rourke was waiting on June's porch. He leaned against the railing like the house belonged to him because he had decided to stand near it. He wore a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. His face was sharper than memory. A black car idled across the street. Mara stopped. The grocery bag slipped in her hand. One peach fell, struck the sidewalk, and rolled into the gutter. Caleb's eyes dropped to her stomach. Everything in his face changed, not softened. Changed, like something locked inside him had been kicked open. For a long moment the street held its breath. Cicadas screamed from the trees. A dog barked 2 houses down. Somewhere a lawnmower cut off. Caleb stepped down from the porch. His voice came low. "Whose child is that?" Mara slapped him. The sound cracked through the humid air. One of his men opened the car door. Caleb lifted a hand without looking away from her. The man stopped. A red mark rose across Caleb's cheek. Mara's palm stung. "The man who called me nothing," she said. Caleb looked at her belly again. This time the shock in his eyes was almost afraid. "You should have told me. I came to tell you. You left. You humiliated me in front of your men. I did not know. You did not ask." His jaw tightened. "My child has been hidden from me for months. My child has been protected from you for months. That baby is mine." Mara's hand covered her stomach. "This baby is mine before he is anything to a man who thinks ownership is the same as love." Caleb stepped closer. He smelled like smoke rain and expensive soap. "I have enemies. I know. If they find out, the child becomes leverage. He became leverage the moment you showed up with armed men." Caleb glanced toward the car, then back at her. "Pack your things." "No." The word was small, but it stood. His expression became very still. Mara. She hated the sound of her name in his mouth, hated that part of her remembered it in candlelight, hated that the baby moved then slow beneath her ribs as if listening. "I built a life here," she said, "in a rented room above a flower shop, in peace. You call this peace watching every car, sleeping with a knife under your pillow. Mara went cold. You had me watched. I had you found. There is a difference only to men like you." Pain tightened low in her belly. She drew a breath through her teeth. Caleb saw it instantly. His hand reached for her. Mara slapped it away. "Do not touch me." His voice dropped. "Are you in pain? I am pregnant in South Carolina. Heat, while the man who broke my heart tries to kidnap me." What do you think Caleb went still at broke my heart? Mara wished she could take that part back, not because it was false, but because it was real. Across the street, June stepped onto the sidewalk. Mara Caleb did not look away. Mara knew what would happen if June interfered. Not because Caleb would order harm, maybe he would not, but men like him carried violence the way storms carried lightning. It could strike without permission. Mara forced her voice steady. "I am all right, June." The lie tasted bitter. Caleb leaned closer low enough that only she heard him. "Hate me in my house. Curse me in my house. But breathe in my house." It was the closest thing to fear he had shown. It was not enough. But the pain had not fully faded. His men were watching. The town she had tried to protect had been dragged to the edge of his world. So Mara walked to the car on her own. That was all she had left. Choice, even inside a trap. The drive back to Charleston felt longer than the escape had. Marshland shimmered under a burning sky. Gas stations came and went. The baby shifted restlessly, as if he knew they were crossing back into danger. Caleb offered her a sealed bottle of water. Mara stared at it. "It is sealed," he said. "I know how bottles work." He set it beside her instead of pushing it. Small mercy. Too late. At dusk, the iron gates of the Rourke mansion opened. Mara looked up at the white columns, the black balconies, the golden windows. Somewhere inside, a small drawer held the first picture of Caleb's son. She stepped out before Caleb could help her. Men lowered their eyes as she entered, but she felt their curiosity move from her face to her belly. Caleb walked beside her close enough to claim not close enough to comfort. At the foot of the stairs, Mara stopped. "You can bring me back here," she said. "You can lock every gate. You can put men outside every door." Caleb's face revealed nothing. "But you will not make me yours by force." For once, he had no answer. The east bedroom was beautiful. Tall windows, white curtains, a carved stone fireplace, fresh flowers on the table, a crystal pitcher of water beside the bed, lavender soap in the bathroom. A woman could have mistaken it for kindness if she had not heard the lock turn softly behind her. Mara stood in the center of the room until the footsteps faded. Then she walked to the window. 2 guards stood near the garden path. Another leaned against the fountain. Beyond them, the iron gates shone black under the porch lights. A beautiful cage was still a cage. She placed both hands on her stomach. "We are not staying here forever," she whispered. The baby moved under her palm, slow and stubborn. Caleb came the next morning with a doctor, a nutritionist, and a woman carrying a clipboard. Mara sat by the window in the same dress from yesterday because no one had asked if she wanted her own clothes. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Palmer. Expensive suit, careful smile, eyes that moved to Caleb before landing on her. Mara noticed. "I am the patient," she said. Dr. Palmer blinked. "Of course. Then speak to me." Silence settled. Caleb stood by the door, arms folded, face unreadable. Dr. Palmer cleared his throat and began again. Mara answered every question calmly. Yes, the baby moved. No bleeding, no contractions, some nausea, some back pain. Mild dizziness if being taken across state lines against her will counted. Dr. Palmer paused over his notes. Caleb's jaw tightened. Mara smiled without warmth. "Write that down too." The routine began after that. Breakfast at 8. Doctor visits twice a week. Walks in the garden under watch. Prenatal vitamins placed beside her water glass. New dresses hung in the closet, all soft fabrics and pale colors chosen by someone who believed pregnancy turned women into porcelain. Mara wore the plainest ones and hated them all. She mapped the house in her mind. Staircases, cameras, guard rotations, service doors, kitchen entrances, staff habits. The mansion was not just a home, it was a machine. Every machine had weak points. Blythe Whitcomb arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Mara saw her first from the balcony, stepping out of a silver car in a cream dress and dark sunglasses. Blonde hair pinned low, diamonds at her ears, a smile so polished it looked sharpened. Caleb met her at the front steps. They spoke too quietly for Mara to hear. Blythe touched his arm. Caleb stepped back half an inch. Blythe noticed. Later, Mara found her in the sitting room pouring tea she had not been invited to pour. "You must be Mara Blythe," said, "and you must be comfortable in houses that are not yours." Blythe smiled. "This house and I have history. So do old stains." The smile stayed, but her eyes sharpened. She looked at Mara's belly. Caleb always did have a weakness for damaged things. Mara picked up the teacup Blythe had poured, smelled it once, and set it down untouched. Damaged people learn where poison hides. Blythe laughed softly. "You are dramatic." "No. Experienced." After that, Blythe came often. Flowers. Advice. Stories about Caleb before Mara knew him. Parties. Old families. Promises made over champagne and bloodlines. She never said former fiancé. The house said it for her. Then Caleb began to get sick. At first it was small. A tremor in his right hand. A pause on the stairs. Sweat at his temples in a cool room. A cup of coffee left unfinished. His color fading beneath his tan. Everyone called it stress. Mara knew the language of bodies under attack. This was not stress. One morning Caleb came to her room because Dr. Palmer had reported her blood pressure was high. He stood near the window lecturing her about rest while his right hand trembled against his thigh. Mara stopped listening to his words and watched his fingers. "Sit down." He frowned. "Excuse me. Sit down before you fall down." "I am fine. You are sweating in a cool room, your pupils are uneven, and your hand has been shaking for 3 days. His eyes darkened. "You have been watching me. There is very little else to do in captivity." She crossed the room, took his wrist, and checked his pulse before he could object. His skin was hot. His rhythm was wrong. Caleb stared at her hand on him. "Do not make that face," she said. "I am not touching you for romance." Something flickered in his eyes. Then why Mara looked toward the closed door, then back at him. "Because someone in this house may be trying to kill you." The room went still. Caleb withdrew his hand. "That is not your concern." Mara laughed, once cold and humorless. "You brought me and my unborn child into this house. Every threat here is my concern." He stood too quickly swayed, then caught himself on the chair. Mara saw the fear he buried. So did he. That night, when the mansion settled into quiet and the guards changed outside her door, Mara waited with her ear near the wood until the footsteps moved away. Then she began to work. Mara waited until the house had gone soft with midnight, the kind of quiet that did not mean peace, only that danger had lowered its voice. A guard passed her door every 12 minutes. Another coughed near the garden entrance. Somewhere below, a clock chimed once, then surrendered the hour back to silence. She sat on the edge of the bed with her shoes in her hand, listening. The baby pressed against her ribs, slow and restless. "I know," she whispered, one palm over her stomach. "We have to be careful." The lock on her bedroom door had been removed after Caleb's symptoms worsened, though 2 men still watched the hall. Caleb called it protection. Mara called it theater. She had watched the guard rotation for days and learned the moments when men grew bored, when they looked at their phones, when their loyalty sagged beneath fatigue. She slipped into the hallway barefoot. The mansion at night was a different animal. Marble floors held the cold. Portraits stared from gold frames. The chandeliers were dimmed to pale halos, turning every doorway into a mouth of shadow. Mara moved toward the private medical room near the back of the house. She had seen it once when Caleb's doctor checked her blood pressure. Locked cabinets, emergency supplies, a centrifuge, testing strips, a small refrigerator marked for samples, a rich man's answer to wounds he could not explain at hospitals. The lock on the door was expensive. Expensive locks had habits. Mara took a hairpin from her pocket, bent it between her fingers, and worked by feel. Her army years had taught her medicine, but war had taught her everything else. How to move quietly, how to wait, how to make panic kneel. The lock clicked. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The room smelled of alcohol wipes, rubber gloves, and secrets. Mara turned on the smallest lamp. Not enough light to spill beneath the door. Enough to work. She laid out what she had collected over the last 2 days. A smear from Caleb's coffee cup taken after breakfast. Powder from one of his vitamin capsules gathered when the housekeeper left the tray unattended. Water from the pitcher in his study. A drop of tea Blythe had poured and Caleb had not finished. A tissue stained from the nosebleed he tried to hide. The evidence looked ordinary. That was what frightened her. Death often did. She tested slowly, carefully. No wasted movements, no dramatic breath. Just one woman in a locked medical room, 8 months pregnant, trying to prove the house itself had become a weapon. The first strip changed, too faintly. The second showed more. By the 4th, Mara felt the room tilt beneath her. A cumulative toxin. Not enough to kill quickly. Not enough to leave a clean trail. Enough to mimic exhaustion, stress, neurological decline, heart strain. Enough for doctors to blame pressure, age, sleeplessness, power, anything except poison. A tragic collapse. A powerful man worked himself to death. Mara stared at the results beneath the lamp. Someone close had access to his food, his drinks, his pills, his study, his trust. The baby kicked hard. Mara pressed one hand to her belly. "I know," she whispered again. "I know." A sound came from the hallway. She killed the lamp. Footsteps passed the door. Slow. Heavy. A guard, maybe. Or someone who knew how to walk like one. Mara waited until silence returned. Then she packed the results into a folder, cleaned the table, and slipped out with her heart steady, only because she refused to let it do anything else. She found Caleb in his study before dawn. The door stood half open. A lamp burned on his desk. Rain moved against the windows in thin silver threads. Caleb was leaning over the desk with one hand pressed flat to the wood and the other gripping his chest. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. His face had gone gray beneath the hard lines of control. A cup of tea sat near his elbow. Mara crossed the room fast. Do not drink anything else." He looked up. His eyes struggled to focus. "Mara." There was no command in his voice, no possession, just her name scraped raw by pain. She took the cup and set it far from him. His mouth tightened. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you alive, apparently." Again. She pulled a small vial from her pocket. "Drink this." His laugh came rough and shallow. "You expect me to trust you?" "No. I expect you to prefer living." His gaze moved from the vial to her face. His hand trembled. This time he did not hide it. "What is it?" "A counter-agent." "To what?" "To the thing killing you while everyone around you calls it stress." The words entered the room and changed the air. Caleb stared at her. Then he took the vial and drank. For the next hour, Mara stayed beside him. She checked his pulse, counted his breathing, watched his pupils. He fought unconsciousness like it was an insult, then lost. When he woke near morning on the leather couch, Mara was still there. She threw the folder onto his chest. The papers slid across his shirt. "You are being poisoned." Caleb opened the folder. His eyes moved over the results. Once, twice. The study was quiet except for the rain. Mara stood over him exhausted, aching, furious, one hand on the curve of her stomach. "I did not save you because I forgive you," she said. "I saved you because my son deserves a father with a soul. Try to grow one before he is old enough to notice the difference." Caleb looked up at her. For once, there was no insult waiting, no order, no shield rising fast enough to save him from himself. Only shock, raw and silent. After that night, the mansion changed, not all at once. Houses built on power did not know how to soften quickly. But small things shifted. The guard outside Mara's bedroom vanished. Her walks in the garden became unsupervised. Her medical journals were returned without being searched. When Dr. Palmer tried to speak over her during an exam, Caleb cut him off from the doorway. "Answer her question." Mara looked at him. Caleb did not look back. Blythe still came, but Caleb no longer let her pour his tea. Mara noticed that too. One evening, she found herself in the garden at dusk, sitting on a stone bench beneath jasmine vines. The air smelled of wet earth and summer flowers. Her back ached in a low, steady rhythm. The baby rolled beneath her hand, making her pause and breathe through it. Caleb appeared at the edge of the path. He stopped several feet away. "May I sit?" The question sounded strange in his mouth, like a language he had learned late and badly. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. He sat at the far end of the bench, leaving space between them. For a while neither spoke. The fountain whispered in the dark. At last, Caleb said, "What I said that morning was unforgivable." Mara watched the water. "Yes, I said it because my men were watching. That makes it smaller, not better." "I know." The answer surprised her more than she wanted it to. Caleb lowered his eyes to his hands. "You saw me weak. Twice. I did not know what to do with that. You could have said thank you." A bitter breath left him. "I was not raised for simple things." "No one is," Mara said. "We learn or we become monsters." His jaw flexed. Then he looked at her stomach. "Does he move often?" Mara's body went still. "He moves when he wants to." Caleb nodded slowly, as if even that small fact mattered. "I do not know how to be a father. That is not my job to fix." "No," he said quietly. "It is mine to learn." Mara hated the way those words found the smallest weak place in her anger. Not forgiveness, not trust, Something more dangerous because it came before either of them. A crack. Blythe saw it. 2 days later, the house erupted before breakfast. A burner phone was found beneath Mara's mattress. Then printed bank transfers appeared with Mara's name connected to Nolan Creed. Then encrypted messages, shipping routes, security schedules, weapons locations. Evidence stacked so neatly it looked placed by a careful hand. Mara stood in the center of her bedroom while 2 men searched through her drawers. Gideon stood at the door, his face pale. Mara looked at him. "Do you believe this?" He did not answer quickly enough. That was its own answer. Caleb summoned her to the dining hall. Every important man in his organization was there. The long table gleamed under chandelier light. The curtains were drawn despite the morning. Gideon stood near the wall. Blythe waited by the fireplace in a black dress, calm as a widow at a funeral she had arranged. Caleb stood at the head of the table. On the marble floor near his feet was an open velvet ring box. A diamond ring lay inside, catching the light with cruel brightness. Mara looked at it, then at him. His face was a mask. His eyes were ruined. "I was going to make you my wife," he said. The words struck places in her she had not known were still tender. Then he threw a stack of papers across the table. "How long have you been working for Nolan Creed?" Mara did not touch them. "You cannot be serious. The phone was in your room. Then someone put it there. The transfers are in your name. Then someone used my name. There is a recording." Mara's eyes moved to Blythe. Blythe did not blink. Mara looked back at Caleb. "And you believe it?" Silence answered. Something inside Mara went quiet. Not broken. Finished. "You learned nothing," she said. Caleb flinched as if she had slapped him. Then pride saved him from pain. "Take her downstairs." Gideon stepped forward. "Caleb." Caleb did not look away from Mara. Now. No one touched her roughly. That almost made it worse. They guided her down the back stairs, past the wine cellar, past old brick walls sweating with damp, into a room beneath the mansion where the air smelled of mildew rust and forgotten things. The door closed. The lock turned. Mara stood in darkness until her eyes adjusted. A narrow cot, a small barred window near the ceiling, a bucket in the corner. Stone floor cold beneath her feet. The baby kicked hard. Mara pressed both hands to her stomach and bent forward. "Not here," she whispered. "Please, not here." For a few minutes she let herself shake. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand and listened. Footsteps above, pipes knocking, water dripping near the wall, a guard coughing every few minutes, a tray slot at the bottom of the door, the faint scrape of wind near the small window. A prison was still a room. Rooms had exits. For 48 hours, Mara became what war had made her. Patient, observant, merciless with detail. She counted the guard's steps, measured the delay between meal trays, used a bent spoon to loosen old mortar around the window frame. When pain tightened low across her belly, she breathed through it and kept working. On the second night, Gideon brought the tray himself. He opened the door only wide enough to slide it inside. Mara sat on the cot, one hand hidden beneath her thigh, fingers closed around the spoon. Gideon did not look at the window. He did not look at the dust on the floor. He set down the tray and said quietly, "I heard the recording." Mara stared at him. "It was not your voice," he said. "Then tell him." "I am trying. That is not enough." His face tightened. "No," he said. "It is not." He slid something small beneath the edge of the tray before standing. A paper clip. Mara looked at it, then at him. "I am sorry," Gideon whispered. The door closed. The lock turned. Mara waited until his footsteps faded. Then she took the paper clip. By dawn, the window latch gave. The opening was impossibly narrow. Mara pulled herself up onto the cot, then onto the stone ledge, breathing through the weight of her body and the fear that the baby would shift wrong at the worst moment. The metal scraped her arm. She bit down on the sleeve of her dress. Her shoulders fit first, then her ribs, then her belly caught against the stone. Pain flashed white behind her eyes. Mara froze, gasping without sound. "No," she breathed. "No baby. Stay with me." She twisted, pushed scraped skin from her shoulder and slid through. She fell into wet grass outside the foundation wall, one hand clamped beneath her stomach. For a moment she could not move. The morning was gray and cold. Fog clung to the garden. The mansion loomed above her, white and silent, blind in the dawn. No alarm. Not yet. Mara forced herself onto her knees, then her feet. Barefoot, bleeding, carrying her son through the wet grass, she ran. Inside the mansion, Caleb broke the lie just after sunrise. Not because mercy found him first, because anger finally became investigation. Something in Blythe's evidence had been too perfect, the recording too clean, the transfers too easy to find, the messages too complete. Caleb had built his life among liars. He knew when someone had arranged truth like flowers in a vase. By morning, his men had dragged the technician from a motel outside Savannah. The man broke before Caleb touched him. He admitted to fabricating the voice recording. Gideon traced the payments through shell charities connected to Blythe's family accounts. Another message surfaced from Nolan Creed's people discussing the poison dosage and Mara's fall in the same thread. Caleb read it standing in his study. His face went colorless. Blythe was brought in under guard. She wore ivory silk and no fear. Caleb held up the papers. "You poisoned me." Blythe smiled. "I saved this family from becoming a nursery for her ambition. She saved my life." "No," Blythe said. "She made you kneel." Caleb's hand tightened around the papers. "She carried my son." For the first time, Blythe's smile cracked. Then it returned sharper. "And you wanted to believe she betrayed you," she whispered. "I only gave you permission." Caleb stared at her. The words did what bullets had not. They entered clean. He left her under guard and ran. Gideon followed him down the stairs to the cellar. The door opened. The room was empty. The cot had been shoved beneath the window. The tray lay overturned. The small window hung open. Blood marked the stone near the frame. Caleb reached for it with 2 fingers. His own breathing changed. For 1 second, he looked like a man standing at a crime scene and realizing the body missing from it was his own soul. Then he tore through the house. Her room. Empty. The garden. Empty. The east stairs. Empty. At the entrance hall, he stopped so suddenly Gideon nearly ran into him. The small drawer beneath the antique table sat closed. A memory moved through Caleb. Mara leaving. Her hand near the drawer. The quiet click he had ignored because he had been too busy protecting his pride to wonder what grief sounded like. He reached for the brass handle, opened it. Inside lay a curled ultrasound photo worn at the edges by time and silence. Caleb picked it up slowly. The world narrowed to grainy black and white. A tiny shape floated there. His child. His son. On the back in Mara's steady handwriting were the words he had earned. "Even without a father, this baby will know love." Caleb sank to the floor beneath the chandelier. The mansion went silent around him. No one laughed. No one spoke. The most feared man on the Carolina coast sat with an ultrasound photo shaking in his hands, finally understanding that Mara had not hidden his child to punish him. She had hidden him because Caleb had shown her exactly what kind of father he would be. Gideon stood a few steps away, his voice low. "She came to tell you." Caleb did not answer. "She had it in her hand," Gideon said. Caleb closed his eyes. He saw her standing in the sitting room, soaked from rain blood on her sleeve's envelope in her grip. He heard his own voice. "I would never touch a woman like her." His hand folded around the photo, careful and desperate. Outside, Mara was already gone. She moved through Charleston before the city fully woke. Her feet were raw, her dress torn, blood dried along her forearm where the cellar window had scraped her skin. Every breath pulled through her chest like broken glass, but she kept one hand under her belly and the other around the strap of her medical bag. The baby moved hard, low, and alive. "Stay with me," she whispered. She slipped into a public restroom near the bus station, washed the blood from her arm, and changed into spare clothes from her bag. A loose gray sweater, black pants, shoes stolen from the laundry room before her escape. In the mirror she looked pale, bruised, pregnant enough that no disguise could hide her. But her eyes were steady. Caleb had called her nothing. Then he had brought her back like property. Then he had believed the first lie that gave him permission to punish her again. Mara touched the mirror with 2 fingers. No more. She bought a bus ticket with cash under the name Mara Lane. Not south. Not toward Beaufort. Not anywhere Caleb would think she would go. She traveled inland, station to station, town to town. She slept in short, shallow pieces with one hand inside her bag around the pocket knife. She ate crackers when she could, drank water when her stomach allowed it, said little, asked less. A week passed, then another. Her body grew heavier. Her feet swelled. Her back ached constantly. Sometimes in the corner booth of a diner or the rear seat of a bus, the baby would roll beneath her ribs and fear would go quiet for one clear second. He was still there. He was still hers. In Asheville, North Carolina, under a gray mountain sky, labor began in a motel bathroom. At first, Mara told herself it was false labor. She timed the pains with the cheap clock above the sink. 10 minutes apart. 7. 5. She gripped the counter as another contraction rose through her, hard and merciless. "No," she whispered. "Not here." The room smelled of bleach and old smoke. The light above the mirror buzzed. Through the wall, a television audience laughed at something that had nothing to do with pain. Another contraction hit. Mara doubled over, one hand braced against the sink, the other pressed low against her stomach. "All right," she breathed. "All right, baby. You win." She drove herself to a small hospital before dawn, stopping twice on the side of the road to breathe through pain sharp enough to turn the world white at the edges. At the front desk, she gave the name Mara Lane and no emergency contact. The nurse on duty looked at her torn, calm, her swollen belly, the old medical bag clutched in her hand. She did not ask too many questions. That was mercy. Her name was Tessa Rowe. She had warm brown eyes, quick hands, and a voice that made the room feel less empty. "Look at me," Mara Tessa said when the pain became too much. "You are not alone in this room. I am right here." Mara wanted to believe her. Another contraction rose. She clutched the rail and pushed with everything the world had not yet taken from her. The birth was long enough for daylight to fill the window. Long enough for Mara to curse Caleb once, pray twice, and nearly bite through her lip trying not to scream. No mother held her hand. No husband waited outside. No father stood nearby to hear his son arrive. Only Tessa counting softly, telling her when to breathe, when to push, when to rest. Then the sound came. A cry. Small. Furious. Perfect. The room changed. Tessa placed the baby on Mara's chest, and Mara forgot pain, forgot blood, forgot the mansion, the cellar, the men hunting her, the cruel words that had tried to make her smaller. Her son was warm against her skin. Dark hair, tiny mouth, fists curled like he had entered the world ready to fight. Mara looked down at him and broke open in a way that did not feel like weakness. "Hi, Noah," she whispered. "I am your mama." His crying softened at her voice. Mara laughed through tears. "I have enough love for both of us," she said. "Do you hear me? Enough for both of us." Tessa turned away politely, giving her the privacy of a woman meeting the only person who had never hurt her. 6 weeks after Noah was born, Mara had learned the new shape of exhaustion. It lived in her shoulders, under her eyes, in the way she woke before Noah even cried, in the way she measured safety by exits, shadows, unfamiliar cars, and how fast she could pack. She rented a small room outside Asheville above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon at dawn. Noah slept in a second-hand drawer lined with folded blankets until Mara found a used crib at a church sale. She worked where she could. A feverish child in a trailer park, an old woman with infected stitches, a construction worker who paid her in groceries. She did not know that in Charleston, Caleb Rourke was destroying himself trying to find her without becoming the man she had run from. Nolan Creed attacked first from the north. A shipment vanished near Savannah. A warehouse burned outside Wilmington. 2 lieutenants disappeared with cash and loyalty that had never been as deep as they claimed. Caleb sat through meetings with the ultrasound photo folded inside his wallet. When men spoke of territory, he heard Mara's voice. "You learned nothing." When they spoke of retaliation, he saw blood on the cellar window. When they asked for orders, he looked at their faces and wondered which of them had laughed the morning he called her nothing. One night, Gideon found him in the entrance hall, sitting beneath the chandelier, the drawer open beside him. The ultrasound photo lay in Caleb's palm. "You have not slept," Gideon said. Caleb did not look up. "She was going to tell me." Gideon stayed silent. She had it in her hand. "I made her swallow the truth because I was afraid my men would think I cared." His voice was flat, but something ruined lived beneath it. Gideon stepped closer. "You did worse than hurt her." Caleb looked up. Gideon held his gaze. "You proved her right." The words stayed in the hall long after Gideon left. Caleb looked down at the photo again. The baby in the image had no name yet, not to him, no weight in his arms, no cry in his ears. Only a shape in black and white, and a sentence on the back that made every empire he had built feel like ash. For the first time in his life, Caleb Rourke understood that finding Mara was not the same as bringing her back, and wanting his son was not the same as deserving him. So he did not send men. That was the first thing Gideon noticed. Caleb stood in the study with the ultrasound photo on the desk between them. Dawn had not fully broken over Charleston. The windows were gray, the house quiet, the old empire breathing beneath the floors like an animal that did not yet know it was dying. Gideon waited for the order he knew by heart. Find her. Follow her. Bring her back. Caleb looked at the tiny black and white shape in the photograph until his face went still. Then he said, "I need you to find her." Gideon's eyes lifted. Caleb heard what was not spoken. "No one touches her," he said. "No one frightens her. No one waits outside her door. If you find her, you give her a letter and leave." Gideon studied him. "And if she runs again?" Caleb's jaw tightened, but the answer came quietly. "Then she runs." It cost him to say it. Gideon saw that. Caleb Rourke had built his name by closing his fist around every threat, every debt, every man who thought he could walk away. Letting someone choose was not instinct to him. It was violence turned inward. He sat down and wrote the letter by hand. Not with one of his assistants, not typed, not dictated. His handwriting was controlled at first, then rougher near the end. Mara. I found the photo. I know you came to tell me. I know what I did. I will not ask you to forgive what I have not earned the right to name. I will not come with men. I will not take him from you. I will not call him mine as if you were only the road that brought him here. If you allow it, I want only to know that you are both safe. If you say no, I will leave. Caleb. He folded the letter once, then he gave it to Gideon like he was handing over a weapon pointed at his own heart. Months passed before Gideon found her. Mara had become good at disappearing, but motherhood made invisibility harder. Babies needed doctors, milk, clean blankets, safe rooms, and women who could not sleep through danger because they had learned to hear breathing in the dark. She was living outside Asheville by then, in a small mountain town where the roads curled between pines and the mornings carried the smell of wood smoke and bread. Her apartment sat above a bakery owned by a woman who rose before sunrise and sang hymns while kneading dough. The place was small, with sloped ceilings, old floorboards, and a window over the alley where rainwater gathered in a dented tin can. It was not much. To Mara, it was a kingdom. Noah slept in a second-hand crib near her bed. He had Caleb's dark hair and Mara's serious mouth, though his smile arrived quickly and without warning. He hated peas. He liked the sound of spoons against bowls. He quieted when Mara hummed low against his temple. When he cried, he did it with his whole body, fists tight, face red, furious at the world for failing to understand him fast enough. Mara worked at a rural health clinic during the day, then took small house calls at night when she could. A feverish toddler. An old woman with swollen ankles. A roofer with a cut he insisted was nothing until Mara made him look at it properly. She was tired in ways she had not known a body could be tired. But each morning when Noah woke with one hand pressed against his cheek and his eyes wide at the light, Mara felt something inside her answer. Still here, still ours. She checked windows. She memorized exits. She noticed unfamiliar cars. She kept a packed bag behind the laundry basket and cash taped beneath a drawer. Fear did not leave. It learned to sit in the corner while life went on. Gideon found her outside the clinic after closing on a cold afternoon. Mara stepped onto the sidewalk with Noah strapped against her chest beneath her coat. The sky was low and pale. The mountains in the distance looked blue and tired. She was locking the clinic door when she saw him across the street. Gideon Shaw stood beside a parked sedan. Alone. No black SUV, no guards, no gun visible. His hands were empty except for one folded envelope. Mara's body went cold. She shifted Noah higher against her chest. Her hand moved toward the pepper spray in her pocket. Gideon raised both palms. I am not here to take you anywhere. Mara said nothing. I came alone. Men like you are never alone. His face changed a little at that. Not offended. Accepting. You are right, he said. But today I am as close to alone as I can make myself. Noah stirred against Mara, making a soft, sleepy sound. Gideon's eyes dropped for only a second, then lifted back to Mara's face. He did not stare at the baby. That mattered more than he knew. He asked me to give you this, Gideon said. Does he know where I live? No. Do you? Gideon paused. Mara's hand tightened. I know the town, he said. Not your apartment. I will not look for it unless you ask. I will not. I know. She stared at the envelope. Why should I read anything from him? Gideon's voice lowered. You should not do anything you do not want to do. The answer was not what she expected. He took one step forward, set the envelope on the hood of a parked car, then stepped back. I should have helped you sooner, he said. Mara's eyes hardened. Yes, Gideon took that too. Then he left. Noah woke as the sedan disappeared down the road. He blinked up at Mara with Caleb's dark eyes and no knowledge of any of it. Mara stood in the cold until her fingers ached. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Mara placed the letter on the kitchen table and stared at it while the bakery ovens warmed beneath the floor. She made tea, did not drink it. She folded Noah's clean clothes, unfolded them, folded them again. At midnight, she opened the letter. She read it once, then again. The words did not erase the cellar. They did not erase the mansion, the locked door, the men laughing the way Caleb had looked at her when he decided suspicion was easier than trust. But the letter did something worse than beg. It did not demand. Mara sat at the table until the tea went cold. 3 weeks later, she agreed to meet Caleb in a public park on a Sunday afternoon. She chose the place. She chose the hour. She brought Tessa Rowe, the nurse who had delivered Noah, to sit on a nearby bench with her phone in her hand and a look that promised trouble if anyone moved wrong. Caleb arrived on foot. No guards. No black car idling at the curb. No expensive suit. He wore a dark coat and looked thinner than Mara remembered. Not weak. Caleb Rourke could have been bleeding out and still made a room aware of him, but something had been stripped from him. The polished cruelty was gone. Or maybe not gone, Mara thought. Maybe leashed. He stopped 10 feet away. His eyes moved to the stroller. Noah sat bundled beneath a blanket, chewing on the corner of a soft toy, unimpressed by destiny. Caleb's face changed. It was not the shock from Beaufort, not possession, not anger. This was quieter, and because it was quieter, it frightened Mara more. He looked at her. "May I come closer?" One question. That was all. Mara let the silence stretch until he felt the full weight of needing her permission. Then she nodded. Caleb approached slowly. He knelt in the grass beside the stroller, leaving space between his body and the child. Noah looked at him with wide, dark eyes. Caleb swallowed. "Hello, Noah." The name trembled almost too soft to hear. Noah reached out and caught Caleb's finger. Caleb closed his eyes. Mara looked away. The moment was too painful to hate and too dangerous to trust. When Caleb opened his eyes again, they were wet, though no tears fell. "He is beautiful," he said. Mara's voice stayed even. "He is safe." Caleb nodded as if those 3 words were more important than any praise. "I know that is because of you." Mara did not answer. After 10 minutes, Caleb stood and stepped back without being asked. That too Mara noticed. "Can I see him again?" he asked. "This is not forgiveness. I know. This is not us. I know. You do not come to my home unless I invite you. You do not send men near him. You do not make decisions for him. You do not call him yours like I was just the room he passed through to get here." Caleb took every word without flinching. "He is yours first," he said. Mara's eyes sharpened. "Do you understand what that means?" "No," he said. The honesty struck harder than a polished lie would have. He looked at Noah. "Not fully, but I am trying to learn without making you pay for the lesson." Mara hated that the answer sounded true. She glanced at Tessa. Tessa's face remained guarded, but she gave the smallest nod. Not approval. A witness. Mara looked back at Caleb. "1 visit, supervised. If you break 1 rule, you disappear from our lives." Caleb nodded. "Thank you." Mara almost laughed. "For threatening you, for letting me earn even that." The visits came slowly. At first, once every 2 weeks, always in public. Parks. The clinic courtyard. A diner where Tessa knew the owner and the exits were clear. Caleb never arrived late, never arrived with men, never brought gifts large enough to feel like pressure. The first time he brought an expensive silver rattle. Mara looked at it. No. Caleb looked down at the rattle as if it had betrayed him. "No, Noah does not need silver. He needs diapers." The next time Caleb brought diapers. Wrong size. Mara stared at the package. Caleb looked at Noah, then at the package, then back at Mara. "I will learn. You could read the label. I will learn faster." Against her will, Mara felt her mouth almost curve. He learned. He learned that Noah hated peas and loved mashed sweet potatoes. He learned that Noah liked rain tapping against windows. He learned that if he hummed low enough, Noah would stop fussing and stare at him like he was trying to remember something. He learned to ask before picking Noah up. Every time. At first, Mara thought it was performance. A criminal man playing gentle because gentleness had become the price of admission. Then, one afternoon, Noah wobbled on uncertain legs near a park bench and fell onto the grass. Caleb moved instantly, one hand reaching down. Then he stopped himself so sharply it looked painful. He looked at Mara. "Can I?" The question came fast, frightened natural. That was when Mara understood. He was not performing. He was practicing. And practice was what change looked like before it became part of the body. Mara nodded. Caleb picked Noah up carefully. "You are all right, little man," he murmured. The ground was rude. Noah sniffled once, then laughed. Mara turned away before Caleb could see her face soften. Outside of those visits, Caleb was dismantling what had once made him untouchable. He gave information to federal investigators through lawyers who hated him and needed him. Shipping routes, names, accounts, warehouses. Men who had once called him boss began to vanish into indictments, deals, and fear. Nolan Creed smelled weakness and came for the spaces Caleb left behind. Caleb did not tell Mara all of it. She would not have wanted the details. But danger had a way of finding what men tried to hide. It found her on a rainy Thursday evening. Mara noticed the car outside the bakery first. Blue sedan, mud on the tires. Same dent near the rear light. It had been outside the clinic that morning and near the grocery store the day before. Her pulse changed, but her hand stayed calm. Noah was on her hip, sleepy and warm. He had one fist tangled in her sweater. Mara turned off the kitchen light and moved away from the window. She called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. "Mara." "They found us." His silence lasted less than a breath. "Where are you? I am not waiting for you to save me." "I know," he said. "Tell me where to send help that will not scare you." The sentence stopped her. Not because it fixed anything. Because the old Caleb would have said stay there. This Caleb knew better. Mara gave him the location of an old service road 2 miles from town, not her apartment. She strapped Noah into his carrier, grabbed the emergency bag, and slipped down the back stairs through the bakery storage room. Rain came down hard. The alley smelled of wet flour and asphalt. She made it to her car and drove without headlights for the first stretch, then turned onto the service road where trees crowded close on both sides. Noah began to cry as if he felt the fear moving through her chest. "I know," Mara whispered. "I know, baby." Headlights appeared behind her, then another set ahead. Mara braked hard. The road had been cut off. A man stepped from the front car with a gun low at his side. Mara unbuckled Noah with shaking hands and moved fast. She grabbed the tire iron from beneath the front seat and slid out into the rain, keeping the car between herself and the men. Noah screamed against her chest. "Easy," one man called. "No one wants to hurt the baby." Mara's grip tightened on the tire iron. "Then turn around." The man smiled. "You know we cannot do that." A black truck roared in from the far end of the road, tires spitting gravel. Caleb stepped out before it fully stopped. Gideon came from the passenger side, gun raised. Caleb's eyes found Mara first, then Noah, then the men. His face went cold in a way Mara remembered too well. But when he spoke to her, his voice was steady. "When you see the opening, go, and you I will make one." The first shot cracked through the rain. Everything became motion. Gideon fired. One of Nolan's men fell behind the front car. Caleb moved toward the line of fire, not away from it. Mara ducked behind her car, Noah crying hard against her chest, her body curved around him. Now Caleb shouted. Gideon opened the passenger door of the truck and waved her forward. Mara ran. Mud sucked at her shoes. Rain blinded her. Noah's cries tore at her ear. She heard gunfire behind her, heard Caleb grunt, heard a body hit metal. She turned despite herself. Caleb stood between her and Nolan's last man. The gun lifted. Caleb moved first. The shot meant for Mara struck him in the side. He did not fall at once. He staggered, one hand going red against his coat, and still drove his shoulder into the man hard enough to knock him down. Gideon grabbed Caleb before he hit the ground. Federal sirens rose in the distance, thin at first, then closer. Mara stood in the open rain with Noah clutched to her chest, staring at Caleb as blood spread beneath his hand. For one terrible moment she was back at St. Jude's, back at the harbor, back in every room where his life had somehow become something her hands were asked to hold. Caleb looked at her, not asking her to come back, not asking her to save him, only making sure she was still standing. "Go," he said. Mara's body knew the old rule, the child first. She got into Gideon's truck with Noah and did not look back until the sirens swallowed the road. Caleb survived. Barely. The bullet tore through muscle and left infection behind. He spent weeks in a guarded hospital room under a name nobody used in public. Federal agents came and went. Lawyers argued in corners. Gideon stayed near the door and looked older every time Mara saw him. She did not visit at first. Then Tessa said, "You do not owe him your bedside." "I know, but you are going to go anyway." Mara folded Noah's blanket slowly. "Yes." The first time she entered Caleb's hospital room, he was awake, pale thinner, one hand resting over bandages beneath the sheet. His eyes found her. Then Noah asleep in her arms. He tried to sit up. Mara pointed at him. "Do not." He stopped. A faint shadow of a smile crossed his mouth. "You still give orders well. You still need them." Silence settled. Caleb looked at Noah. "Is he all right?" "Yes." "Are you?" Mara looked at him for a long moment. "No." Caleb closed his eyes. "I know. No," she said. "You do not. Not all of it." He opened his eyes again. "Then tell me what you want me to know." There had been a time when he would have defended himself, explained danger, justified force, turned fear into a reason and reason into a cage. Now he waited. So Mara told him. Not everything, not the deepest cellar places, but enough. She told him what it felt like to be locked away while carrying his child, what it felt like to run barefoot through wet grass with blood on her arms, what it felt like to give birth alone under another name because the father of her son had become another thing to survive. Caleb did not interrupt. When she finished, his face looked carved open. "I cannot repair that," he said. "No, I can only make sure I never become that man again." Mara shifted Noah gently. "No," she said. "You can make sure Noah never has to meet him." That stayed between them. A year passed. The trials began. Caleb testified behind closed doors, then in court. The Rourke empire was taken apart in public language that made violence sound like paperwork. Warehouses were seized, accounts frozen. Men who had once laughed in marble rooms now sat with lawyers and lowered eyes. Blythe Whitcomb testified to save herself. She still looked elegant. It did not help her. Her family name could not bleach poison from the record. Nolan Creed disappeared into federal custody. Caleb did not walk free clean. There was no clean left for a man like him, but he walked out stripped of the kingdom he had once mistaken for himself. One autumn evening, Mara found him outside her clinic. The mountains behind him were gold with sunset. Leaves moved along the sidewalk. The bakery down the street had its windows fogged from warm ovens. Caleb wore a simple coat, no guards, no title left that mattered. Noah, now walking with wild confidence, saw him from the clinic doorway. Noah shouted. The word struck the air. Mara went still. Caleb did too. Noah ran on unsteady legs toward him. Caleb dropped to one knee, but even then, even with his son running to him, he looked at Mara first. Still asking. Always asking. Mara let him wait. Then she nodded. Noah crashed into Caleb's arms, laughing. Caleb closed his eyes and held him like something sacred and breakable. Mara watched from the doorway. Love was not enough. She knew that now. Regret was not enough. Blood was not enough. A child was not a bridge unless both adults stopped using him as a battlefield. Caleb looked up at her over Noah's curls. I do not want to own a place in your life, he said. I want to be invited into one, even if it is small, even if it takes years. Mara stepped down onto the sidewalk. The evening air smelled of cinnamon-cold leaves and rain waiting somewhere beyond the hills. You can walk us home, she said. Caleb did not move right away. The permission hit him harder than any forgiveness could have. Mara lifted an eyebrow. That was not a marriage proposal, Rourke. I know. And it was not forgiveness. I know. Noah grabbed Caleb's hand with one hand and Mara's with the other. Together, the three of them walked down the sidewalk beneath the gold-fading sky. Caleb did not lead. Mara did not follow. For once, they walked side by side. Later in Mara's apartment, Noah slept with one arm thrown over his blanket. The bakery below had gone quiet. Rain tapped softly against the window. On a small shelf near the kitchen sat the original ultrasound photo framed beside Noah's first hospital bracelet. Mara had kept it after Caleb returned it to her. The words on the back remained. Even without a father, this baby will know love. Below it, written later in Mara's hand, was one more line. And if his father stays, he will learn that love is not possession. It is permission, patience, and proof. Caleb stood at the apartment doorway with his coat still on. Mara looked at him. You can come in. He stepped inside only after she said it. And that was how Mara knew the old Caleb Rourke was truly gone. Not because he had suffered, not because he had bled, not because he loved her, but because he waited.